Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every person's life when they stand at a quiet crossroads. The path of least resistance lies to one side. Comfortable, familiar, and paved with excuses. The other is steep, rocky, and solitary. It demands something uncomfortable. It demands work, not the kind assigned to you by others, but the kind you assign to yourself, the kind you resist, the kind you postpone, the kind you know will shape your destiny. Success begins when you act despite resistance. This idea cuts to the very core of what separates those who dream from those who achieve. Resistance is a universal force. It shows up in every life, every day, and especially in the moments when change is most needed. It's the invisible barrier that sits between you and your potential. Most people wait for the resistance to vanish before they begin. They wait for clarity, for the right mood, for confidence, for the stars to align. But that wait becomes a lifetime. The key is understanding that resistance never leaves. You must act through it. Resistance wears many disguises. It looks like fear, fatigue, self-doubt, and distraction. It whispers in the voice of logic, telling you to wait, to plan a little more, to rest just one more day. It makes its strongest case when you are closest to doing something meaningful. This is not a coincidence. It is a test. Resistance exists to test your seriousness. It wants to know how badly you want what you say you want. Most people fail the test. They say, not today, or maybe tomorrow, and that becomes the story of their life. But there is a different path. You can decide that you will move anyway. You can act even while afraid. You can start even when unmotivated. That act, small as it may seem, is the seed of transformation. When you take action despite resistance, you declare that you are in charge. You strip power away from excuses and give it back to your will. This is the moment everything begins to shift. Not because the circumstances have changed, but because you have. Every person who has ever built something great, whether in business, art, science, or personal growth, has faced the wall of resistance. They were not superhuman. They simply made a different choice. They acted when it would have been easier to wait. They took steps in the dark without guarantees. And they did this not once, but over and over. This is not about one heroic moment. It's about a daily decision to move forward no matter how loud the resistance becomes. And here's what most people misunderstand. Waiting to feel ready is a trap. Readiness is a product of movement, not a prerequisite. You gain strength by lifting the weight, not by looking at it. Clarity comes after the first steps, not before. Confidence builds by doing, not by waiting to feel confident. Those who act despite resistance understand this deeply. They don't wait for perfect plans. They make progress and let the path unfold as they walk it. There is a kind of magic that happens when you show up consistently in defiance of resistance. Opportunities appear. People take notice. Skills sharpen. And more than anything, you begin to believe in yourself, not because of what you hope to do, but because of what you're actually doing. That belief becomes fuel. That fuel carries you further, but none of it begins without that first act of defiance, the decision to move when every part of you wants to stay still. Resistance will always be present. It does not fade with success. It only shifts shape. But the habit of acting through resistance can be trained like a muscle. Every time you do what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like it, that muscle grows stronger. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to see results. You build momentum. And momentum is more powerful than motivation. Motivation comes and goes. Momentum carries you through both highs and lows. It builds upon itself, becoming a force of its own, but it all begins in that first moment of discomfort, the moment you choose to act anyway. Discipline is more valuable than desire. While desire ignites the spark, it is discipline that keeps the fire burning through the night. Desire is emotional. It fluctuates. It rises when we are inspired by a speech, a book, or a sudden vision of the life we want. But inspiration is a temporary visitor. It does not stay. What remains is the reality of the work that needs to be done. And that work does not care whether you feel like doing it or not. Discipline then becomes the bridge between dreams and results. Desire without discipline is like a car without fuel. It may look impressive. It may even be filled with potential, but it's not going anywhere. People often assume that the most passionate individuals are the most successful. But the truth is, passion without structure leads to chaos. It's not how much you want something that matters most. It's how consistently you're willing to do the work, especially when the initial excitement wears off. Discipline is the force that carries you beyond the honeymoon phase of your ambitions. The problem with desire is that it's unreliable. It's subject to moods, energy levels, and external circumstances. You can feel intensely driven one day and completely disconnected the next. If your progress depends on how strong your desire feels in the moment, your efforts will always be inconsistent. You'll start many things but finish few. Discipline, on the other hand, does not negotiate with feelings. It operates on commitment. It does the work whether you're energized or exhausted, confident or doubtful. That is where real progress comes from. Many people chase motivation as if it's a magical ingredient they must find before they can begin. But the truth is, motivation follows discipline, not the other way around. When you show up and work, even when you don't want to, something shifts inside you. You begin to prove to yourself that you are capable of following through. That self-respect becomes a source of deeper motivation. But it's discipline that must come first. Discipline is the gatekeeper that allows desire to take root and grow into something substantial. Discipline is also what gives structure to chaos. The world is filled with distractions, social media, entertainment, endless obligations. Desire can be easily drowned in noise, but discipline knows how to say no. It protects your time, your focus, your energy. It turns goals into daily practices. It translates vague dreams into routines and habits that you can measure. Through discipline, you take control of your schedule rather than letting the day control you. You stop reacting and start creating. Even when you have a clear goal, discipline is the factor that determines whether you reach it. Every meaningful accomplishment, writing a book, building a business, transforming your body, mastering a skill, requires repeated effort over a long period. No shortcut, no hack, no sudden surge of desire can replace that. There will be setbacks, slow progress, and days when nothing seems to be working. It is in those moments that discipline shows its true value. It keeps you steady. It keeps you moving. Discipline is not about perfection. It is about persistence. It is about showing up and doing your best, even if that best is not spectacular. It is the habit of not quitting. It is the decision to prioritize long-term goals over short-term comfort. That decision, made repeatedly, shapes the direction of your life more than any burst of desire ever could. You do not need to be the most talented, the smartest, or the most passionate. But if you are disciplined, if you keep showing up, keep putting in the work, and keep your promises to yourself, you will accomplish more than those who rely only on fleeting desire. Discipline gives form to ambition. It transforms potential into performance. It is the quiet, invisible force behind every extraordinary result. Action precedes motivation. This is a truth that defies popular belief. Most people wait for motivation to strike before they begin. They wait for the perfect moment, the right feeling, a surge of energy or inspiration to push them into movement. But that moment rarely arrives, and when it does, it fades just as quickly as it came. The truth is, action is the generator of motivation, not its byproduct. Waiting for motivation is like waiting for the wind to carry your ship when you have oars in your hands. The problem with motivation is that it's emotional, and emotions are unpredictable. Some days you wake up ready to take on the world. Other days, even getting out of bed feels like a battle. If your productivity is tied to how you feel, you will achieve very little. But when you choose to act, even in the absence of motivation, something begins to shift. The simple act of starting creates momentum. And momentum is far more powerful than a fleeting mood. It's in the first few minutes of effort that the mind begins to engage. What felt difficult just a moment ago begins to feel possible. A task that seemed overwhelming becomes manageable. You begin to gain clarity, confidence, and energy, not because you waited to feel inspired, but because you acted. This is the paradox. Most people never realize the act of doing generates the feeling of wanting to do more. Action flips a switch in the brain. It signals that the work has begun, and with it, a sense of progress emerges. Progress is addictive. When you take action, even a small one, you create evidence for yourself. You prove that you are capable. That proof becomes fuel. You begin to believe, not because someone told you to believe, but because your own actions showed you that belief is warranted. This is how motivation is built, from the ground up, not the top down. You don't think your way into motivation. You act your way into it. One of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking they must feel ready to begin. They tell themselves they'll start on Monday or next month or when the timing is better, but there is no ideal time. Conditions are never perfect. The perfect time is a myth sold by procrastination. The only real power you have is in the present moment, and in that moment, the most powerful thing you can do is begin, no matter how small the step. That first step breaks inertia. Inertia is the enemy of progress. A body at rest tends to stay at rest, but a body in motion stays in motion. The same applies to human behavior. The hardest part is starting. Once you begin, the resistance begins to lose its grip. It weakens. It gives way to flow, and that flow is where real productivity begins to grow. Action also eliminates doubt. When you're stuck in your head, everything feels larger and more complicated than it is. But when you take action, the fog starts to lift. You stop overthinking and start doing. The task becomes real, not theoretical. Problems become puzzles to solve, not reasons to quit. The moment you begin, you move from passive observer to active participant in your own life. That shift is transformative. Even on your worst days, action is your lifeline. You may not be able to do everything, but you can always do something. One small action leads to another. A few minutes turn into an hour. An hour turns into real progress. That is how momentum is built, through consistent action, not fleeting motivation. Once you understand that action is the cause and motivation is the effect, you'll never sit around waiting again. You'll know that the path to motivation runs directly through movement. Consistency builds character and results. It is not talent, intelligence, or luck that shapes the most successful people. It is their ability to show up and do the work day after day, regardless of circumstances. Consistency is the quiet force that compounds over time. While the world often celebrates dramatic breakthroughs and sudden wins, the truth is that those moments are always the result of sustained effort that goes unnoticed by most. It is not what you do once in a while that matters, but what you do every single day, especially when no one is watching. Character is formed in the moments when it's easier to quit, but you choose to continue. When you consistently do what you said you would do, even when you don't feel like it, you build a reputation with yourself. That self-trust becomes the foundation of your confidence. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who honors their word, someone who doesn't need to be pushed or reminded. This internal respect is more powerful than praise from others. It becomes the voice that tells you to keep going when everything around you suggests you stop. Consistency also sharpens skill. No one becomes excellent overnight. Mastery is a product of repetition. Whether you're writing, building, speaking, training, or selling, it's the repeated daily engagement with your craft that brings improvement. Each time you show up, you're not just getting something done, you're becoming someone different. You're refining your technique, deepening your understanding, and building the muscle memory that turns effort into instinct. The gap between where you are and where you want to be closes one consistent action at a time. Results, too, are born from consistency. Most goals are not achieved by giant leaps, but by small steps taken repeatedly over time. The person who writes a few hundred words a day will finish the book. The one who trains for 30 minutes each day will transform their body. The individual who makes one sales call after another will eventually land the client. It's easy to underestimate these small efforts, but they compound. What seems insignificant in the moment adds up to something massive in the long run. Consistency demands discipline, but it also brings clarity. When you engage with your goals daily, patterns start to emerge. You learn what works and what doesn't. You adjust faster. You make smarter decisions because you're in constant motion, not stuck in analysis or hesitation. Inconsistency creates confusion. Consistency breeds insight, and from that insight, your ability to execute becomes more refined and powerful. There is also a psychological shift that occurs when you commit to consistency. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop asking if you feel like it. You stop debating whether or not it's worth it today. The decision has already been made. You do the work. This eliminates mental clutter. It frees up energy. It allows you to pour your focus into execution instead of endless internal debate. That focus translates directly into better results. Consistency isn't glamorous. It doesn't come with instant rewards or dramatic applause. It's often boring. It's often quiet. But it is the one thing that separates the talkers from the doers, the starters from the finishers. Anyone can be motivated for a day. Few can stay committed for months or years. But the ones who do build something unshakable. They develop not only success, but identity. They know who they are because their habits prove it. They do not rely on external validation because their daily effort validates itself. Each action is a vote for the person they want to become, and over time, those votes shape the outcome of their lives. Intention is the seed from which achievement sprouts. Yet the world recognizes only what is done rather than what is merely planned. Every grand vision begins with a thought, a desire to transform circumstances or leave a mark on the world, but that thought remains inert until action brings it into being. The journey from idea to accomplishment is paved by execution, the deliberate step-by-step process in which planning meets doing. Merely wishing for change or outlining a strategy on paper produces no tangible effect. The transformation happens only when you put those plans into motion despite obstacles and doubt. The global economy, breakthrough innovations, and remarkable personal achievements all illustrate the truth that the world rewards execution over intention. It is common to witness countless ideas brimming with potential, yet only a fraction emerge into reality because only a few individuals commit to the rigors of execution. Simply having a clear intention, while necessary, is insufficient on its own. The act of execution converts potential energy into kinetic success. This involves wrestling with uncertainty, embracing risk, and accepting that setbacks are an integral part of the journey. As you work through these challenges, every small step taken is a demonstration of commitment, proving that your intentions are more than just idle thoughts. The success stories of entrepreneurs, inventors, and leaders are not written by those who linger in the realm of possibility. They are authored by those who choose to act even when the path is fraught with difficulties. In every industry, from technology startups to artistic endeavors, success is measured by the efforts put forth, by taking initiative and making the hard choices when immediate rewards are not guaranteed. Each deliberate act of execution, no matter how modest it may seem at the time, lays the groundwork for cumulative progress. With every hurdle overcome, skills are honed, a confidence is built, and the momentum of achievement grows stronger. The difference between those who ultimately realize their dreams and those who remain paralyzed by hesitation is precisely this of the commitment to act regardless of circumstances. Execution is not glamorous, and it rarely brings instant gratification, yet it is the sure path to progress. When you decide to take action, you signal to the world that you are ready to engage with your goals, to face the unpredictable outcomes with determination, and to transform challenges into opportunities. It is through this unrelenting pursuit that hidden potentials are unearthed and turned into measurable success. Every challenge faced while executing your plans contributes to a learning curve that refines your strategies and solidifies your resolve. Success is rarely an instantaneous event. It is the product of persistent action over time. Each failure encountered along the way is repurposed as a stepping stone rather than a deterrent, reinforcing the idea that execution breeds experience. What might begin as a single, modest action snowballs into a series of decisive moves that recalibrate your trajectory and open doors that intention alone could never unlock. In this way, every action taken becomes evidence of your dedication, further motivating you to continue despite any initial shortcomings or external doubts. The world offers no shortcuts for those who substitute intention for execution. While planning and envisioning are valuable, they must eventually give way to tangible work. It is the relentless pursuit of action that distinguishes leaders from dreamers, creators from critics, and achievers from idle thinkers. The process of executing ideas cultivates resilience and adaptability, qualities that ultimately turn visions into realities. 262, change starts with a single, firm decision, not with a vague desire, not with a fleeting thought, but with a definite commitment made deep within the mind. The moment a person resolves truly and fully to alter the course of their life, they ignite a force more powerful than any external resource or condition. It is not circumstances that transform a life. It is the internal shift that occurs when a decision is made without hesitation, without the option to turn back. This decision acts as the foundation upon which all meaningful change is built. There is immense power in deciding. Most people live in a perpetual state of indecision. They entertain possibilities, they flirt with the idea of improvement, they speak in terms of someday and maybe, but they never truly decide. They live in mental limbo, waiting for certainty, waiting for guarantees, waiting for someone to give them permission to change. But nothing happens until they choose. The decision to change must be made with finality. It is the moment you draw a line in the sand and say, no more. That's the moment when progress begins. A real decision eliminates all other options. It doesn't leave room for backtracking, for negotiating with fear, for entertaining old habits. It becomes the new standard by which you operate. When you decide to change, you also decide to leave behind the comfort of what is known. And that's where most people hesitate. They want improvement without discomfort, transformation without uncertainty. But the truth is that every great change requires you to walk through a threshold where old identities must be shed, and that process begins the instant a true decision is made. The strength of a decision lies not in how loudly it is declared, but in how consistently it is honored. You don't need to convince the world. You need to convince yourself. And that conviction comes from clarity. Clarity about what you want, clarity about why you want it, and clarity that you will not quit until it is done. This clarity does not arrive by accident. It is summoned. It is chosen. You do not wait for it. You claim it through the act of deciding. When you make a firm decision, your behavior starts to align with it. Your mind begins to search for opportunities instead of excuses. You start to notice the tools, the people, and the information that can support your new direction. This is not coincidence. This is the mind responding to your focus. The decision you make becomes a command to your subconscious, and your environment begins to shift in response. What once seemed impossible now starts to feel within reach, not because the world changed, but because you changed the lens through which you see it. The most remarkable transformations in history and in personal lives always trace back to a single decision. A decision to no longer accept mediocrity. A decision to rise after failure. A decision to start over, to take control, to become more. That decision doesn't need to be made with fanfare or witnessed by others. It happens quietly, often in a moment of solitude or struggle, but its impact reverberates through every action that follows. The moment you decide, you remove the mental barriers that have kept you stuck. You stop negotiating with your doubts and begin aligning with your purpose. A firm decision gives birth to discipline. It fuels persistence. It steels the mind against distraction. It creates an inner pressure that demands action even when motivation runs dry. This pressure is not a burden. It is a signal of transformation. It is proof that you have chosen a new identity and are willing to pay the price for it. Without decision, discipline falters. Without decision, goals remain abstract. But when the decision is real, your behavior becomes inevitable. You no longer wonder if change will happen. You know it has already begun.